What is up, beautiful people? Welcome to another episode of The Coach's Quarters with your host, Jacob Meadows. And if you listened in to the last episode, you know that I told you that we had a special guest for you, and we absolutely do. So we are going to be doing a deep dive on championship weekend for the NFL playoffs. Joining me live is going to be MeanGene, the Sports King from the MeanGene Show and the Sports King Show on iHeartRadio, to cover the NFL playoffs with me today. What is going on, Mr. MeanGene?
Jacob, what's going on, man? It feels so great to be here, and I am more than happy to be your guest.
That is awesome. I'm excited. I've been excited all week to have you on, and what a treat it is to have you on for another show. Listeners would remember that you were on one of my earliest shows on my launch, courtesy of you being who got me into podcasting in the first place. And what a cool 360 this season has done for us.
Hey, it's been great, Jacob, because let me tell you, man, the season, we get 17 weeks, and next thing you know, it flies by, and here we are, championship weekend, 4 teams, 2 games away from deciding who's going to be in Super Bowl 58.
It's amazing. It goes by way too quick. It's really sad when it ends, but it has been an incredible season. And before we really kick off with all of this information, what have you been up to, man? What has the MeanGene Show had going on for it lately? What have you been up to?
Well, you know, the MeanGene Show has been trying to keep up with these playoffs. Me and Dustin, we get together for the Sports Kings, and we do what we do, trying to make sure we break down these games pretty much like what you're doing here. And we've been trying to set up interviews as well and keeping with our contacts out there in Vegas because, you know, Jacob, man, we spend a lot of time out there, and all of that stuff leads up to this big, gigantic weekend on February 11th when the Super Bowl takes place over there at the Allegiant Stadium there. But as far as the MeanGene Show, we've been kicking off doing the live streaming on Podbean. So if you want to get up in the morning and hear me live, that's fine, 8 a.m. Central Time. If not, you can always catch the podcast. But nevertheless, you know, I've been talking NBA, getting into NC2A basketball, Jacob, because you know in a couple of weeks, conference tournaments are going to be starting, and it won't be long before we be all into March Madness.
Oh, yeah, and I am ready for the madness, man. I wait all year for March. It's my favorite time for sports outside of the Super Bowl weekend. I am stoked for March. College basketball is popping off this season, man. A lot of upsets,
Yeah.
a lot of parity in the league. So this is going to be a good season for NCAA.
Indeed.
But all right, man, let's jump right in. I figured we could go ahead and get our start in the AFC, covering Baltimore versus Kansas City. How does that sound?
Let's do it, man. Let's do it. This is probably the most anticipated game of the weekend, and these two teams, no strangers to each other, 2 polarizing quarterbacks, man. So let's jump into it.
Awesome. Let's do it. And just as an addendum to all of this, all of the actual, the statistics and what have you that I'm going to throw out during this show, all of it was obtained from yahoosports.com. So just to highlight that, all the notes and what have you that I've got statistic-wise are going to be from yahoosports.com. But jumping right into it, Baltimore versus Kansas City. Let me ask you one thing, Gene, just before we even get started, before we even go over any of the actual information. Who do you see coming out on top between Baltimore and Kansas City?
Oh, man. So, you know, you're making me jump the gun here. Kansas City, Andy Reid, this is tough. This is a tougher one because I know Baltimore sitting there at that number 1 seed, earned it, not saying that they haven't played anybody to get there, you know. That Houston Texans team, you know, hats off to them for getting there. But, you know, in the end, they were no match for this Ravens team. But this team, the Kansas City Chiefs are in familiar territory. You know, whether they're at home, whether they're on the road, doesn't matter. They're in another AFC championship game. And, man, they are so deadly and dangerous. So Baltimore's got their hands full. They're going to need that crowd at home to really work their magic. I think the matchups here, you know, they might favor Kansas City a little bit, but then again, Lamar Jackson has a greater matchup right now than Patrick Mahomes because this guy just would not stand still, even though he's been standing still throwing the ball. God dang it, Jacob. Why'd you do this to me, man? Good Lord, man. Can we talk some more about it? I'm not ready to pick yet.
We sure can. We sure can, Mean Gene. And let me tell you what, just to kick it off, right? So Baltimore has averaged 16 and a half points allowed per game. So they're allowing teams to score 16 and a half points allowed across the broad spectrum of this league, right? Kansas City is averaging 21.8 points per game on offense. So just right there, Kansas City is barely scoring over the average allowed by Baltimore for this entire season. And of all the stats that I was able to put together from, the stats universe, that one is one that hung out to me the most because Kansas City has struggled mightily on offense this season, right? And this is in no way a slam show on Kansas City. I think that in terms of playoffs, they are the best team in the league. I mean, all they do is win in the postseason. Patrick Mahomes has been elite. However, when you've struggled all season long, albeit they beat the Bills are a good team. The Bills are also an incredibly injured team, and an offense coming into this game where it's been one of their worst offensive seasons or the worst offensive season since Patrick Mahomes took the reins. Would you be worried about the Kansas City offense potentially sputtering against this number one overall Baltimore Ravens defense that they're coming up against?
Well, I would, Jacob, in a sense. But then again, hey, they took care of Buffalo. Buffalo was in a position to take care of business. They worked hard to get the number 2 seed. They beat Miami in the last regular season of the year to secure that. Just thought that Buffalo was going to do a better job. They made Kansas City come to their territory, and Kansas City still got it done. This is where Andy Reid is so dangerous when it comes to game planning. And look, they were without Tyreek Hill all year. We talked about, man, the receiving core looked suspect, but look at where they are. They're in familiar territory once again. So, they're getting it done with receiver by committee. And I don't care. Travis Kelce is going to be a threat. I know Kyle Hamilton looked like he's going to have that assignment. And Patrick Mahomes is going to make things happen. Isaiah Pacheco is a beast. And I don't know. I mean, I know that Baltimore defense has been great this year. But, man, Kansas City is going to be a tough out.
Yeah, I agree with that. The only asterisk I have next to that, right, is that against Buffalo, Kansas City allowed 72 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns to Josh Allen. And now you transition this defense over against Baltimore, where not only do they have the number 1 rushing offense in the league, but they have Lamar Jackson, whom is arguably or not arguably, whichever side of the pendulum you're on, one of the top 2 best running quarterbacks of this generation. Right. So when you take Lamar's ability to run on the ground, and then you take Kansas City's defense with the inability to stop a running quarterback, no matter how many tackles Josh Allen may have broke, no matter how many of those plays were not necessarily, designed runs where Josh Allen ended up scampering and then taking it through a crease. Would you be worried about Kansas City's defense holding up against this run game that is just so dynamic and come at you from any direction on the field?
Yeah, because they have gotten healthier on the running back side of things, even with Justice Hill and Gus Edwards. They've gotten it done running back by committee. But, damn, you got Lamar Jackson out there with 820 yards, and 5 touchdowns. I mean, he's your biggest threat. So, I mean, it's impressive. And Kansas City's defense, look, I would give the edge to the Ravens defense. I mean, look, you got some big names out there: Raquan Smith, Patrick Queen, Jadeveon Clowney, Kyle Smith, and Geno Stone. I mean, these guys, Ravens are still playing Ravens defense, and this is one reason why they're in a position where they are. This is where they have that balance. They're one of the most balanced teams, other than the 49ers in these playoffs. So, yeah, having the Lamar Jackson who is now so disciplined, Jacob, this guy can throw when he needs to. He needed to run against that Houston defense, and he ran a little bit more than we've seen him run in the last couple of weeks. But he used his legs when he needed to, and he's just such a smarter quarterback now than he's ever been. And Kansas City is going to have their hands full because it's all left up to him and what he decides to do with the ball and how that defense is going to react.
Agreed. And looking at one of the things that is going to end up being a large factor for this game is the injury report for both. So I know it's still earlier in the week, sort of, right? It's Wednesday, so it is earlier in the week, so to speak. But the Kansas City Chiefs have a much steeper hill to climb for the injury report than the Ravens do. So as of right now, right? You have Marlon Humphrey practicing in a limited capacity. You have Delshon Phillips practicing in a limited capacity. Tylan Wallace, limited capacity. And Mark Andrews has been full practice all week. That is basically their entire injury report up to right now. Whereas the Chiefs have Derek Nottie, who hasn't practiced yet this week. Sky Moore, who hasn't practiced yet this week. Isaiah Pacheco hasn't practiced yet this week. Joe Thuney hasn't practiced yet this week. All on the speculative report. This isn't being held out for rest. This is being held out due to legitimate injuries. You do have Willie Gay Jr., back limited participant. L'Jarius Sneed is back as a limited. The rest are practicing in full on the IR. But Kansas City does have more impact players that have not practiced yet this week and could potentially use the practice reps to get ready for this Baltimore juggernaut that they are going up against this week. So how do you expect the injury report to work itself out in this game? And do you, at the end of the day, do you really think that it's going to be impactful, or do you think both teams are going to be dressed and ready regardless of who's suiting up?
Yeah, I mean, I guess as long as we don't see any doubtfuls, questionables are always, suspect. Guys usually play. I mean, you're talking about the biggest game of of the season. I mean, you don't win, you go home, right? So you got to get out there and play. And then the NFL is such a stickler that you have to put guys out there. I don't care if they have a broken fingernail, you almost have to put them as questionable. If for some reason if they're not practicing, you don't play them or whatever. But I think it's a concern. I tell you what, a big concern. You mentioned Mark Andrews, who the Ravens have been really careful with him, man. You get him on the field, and you got Travis Kelce. Those are the best two. They don't get no better than that. And Isaiah Likely has done well. It could just be a big matchup problem for the Chiefs, man. If Mark Andrews is able to come out there and play. But I think Pacheco, who runs angry all the time, and any little ankle, hamstring, stuff like that, those things tend to flare up in the game situation, Jacob. So those questionables, we've seen guys run to the tent. Next thing you know, you get a sideline reporter during the game tell you that so-and-so has been ruled out. Boy, Kansas City can't afford, nor can Baltimore afford those type of injuries in the middle of this AFC Championship game.
Very true. And I do like that you brought up Isaiah Likely, because that was going to be my next question for you. Is with Mark Andrews missing as much time as he has, right? Your hot hand is Isaiah Likely. Likely has been very good in this postseason so far. He was really good in the last 6 weeks of the regular season. Isaiah Likely has been almost unguardable. So if you have Mark Andrews coming back off of injury, right? Do you think that we will see a heavy dose of Mark Andrews, or do you think Harbaugh rides the hot hand with Likely and works Andrews back into the lineup in hopes that he will be full go and have the rust knocked off for the Super Bowl should they end up eliminating Kansas City?
I tell you what, I think Harbaugh is going to do whatever is going to make Lamar Jackson comfortable. And we have seen Lamar Jackson. He's comfortable going to that tight end. If that play calls for that, ball to be thrown to that tight end, that's what Lamar Jackson is going to do, whether it's Andrews or Likely. And I think Kansas City is going to have to figure out, boy, what are we going to do? Whoever they're going to put on either one of those guys, Andrews is a big target. He's like Kelce. Uh, I mean, you might won't likely to be out there. If Andrew's out there, man, it's going to be tough because this guy's going to be ready to play. Um, but I can guarantee you, if both of them are healthy, you won't see Lamar Jackson running the ball as much, man. He's going to hit those targets.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. And I guess one last question from me for you on the Kansas City Baltimore game would be if you had to label one X factor per team. I know you've mentioned Travis Kelce a few times for the Chiefs, but who would be your X factor, one on each team, for somebody to really look out for to make the largest impact on this game for Kansas City and for Baltimore?
Ooh-wee. Well, for Baltimore, X factor, he's been doing it all year, even though he's no stranger here. Nelson Aguilar, just one guy who's been showing up here lately. The one guy that you're probably not going to spend a lot of time. You damn sure not putting your best person on him. But Aguilar has been really, still in the show here of late. And if he's open, Lamar Jackson is going to hit him, and he has. He has done that. So, and he has also had a touchdown catch in 3 of his career games versus KC. So he's no stranger to them. But on the Chiefs side of things, I tell you what, it's about time for Marquez Valdez-Scantling to really do something special. Because, Rashee Rice, you got these other guys there. I know you mentioned Sky Moore, who didn't practice, but Marquez Valdez-Scantling really needs to get something done. He could be that X factor, I think, for the Kansas City Chiefs.
What a game for Marquez Valdez-Scantling to finally go off, right? The AFC Championship. What a turnaround for a season that many have looked down on and kind of said that it wasn't what they were expecting it to be. And for him to really go off in the playoffs, that would be a fairy tale come true for MVS and the Kansas City Chiefs this go around. All right, so that about wraps up KC versus Baltimore. We can go ahead and move on to the second of 2 games this weekend. We have the Detroit Lions versus the San Francisco 49ers. And this is going to be, I think Baltimore, Kansas City might end up being the game of the week, right? It's a 50-50 chance, but I think Detroit versus San Francisco is going to be arguably more exciting from start to finish than the Baltimore KC game is going to be. How about you?
I do too. This game is, people are anticipating this game because it's Detroit. I know the 49ers have been the hot team. They made it to the NFC Championship game last year, 1 game away from the Super Bowl, and the Eagles knock them out. Here they start out hot this year, lose 3 in a row. Then they revamp their defense, man. They go out and get guys that shouldn't have been available, but they were. Bring them on board, and then they reload, and look where they are. Get the number 1 seed, and they're hosting there at Levi Stadium. But I think, so much attention has been put on the 49ers, Jacob. But this Detroit team, man, I think everyone has adopted them. Me and Dustin, we adopted this team 2 years ago. And we love the success of this team and the city. Everyone knows the Detroit city, the story, man. Just a poverty-stricken city, a city that used to be booming, economically, and it's just a good story. It's just a good story that to see the money poured back into that economy there, and the Lions fans who used to be the laughing stock of the NFL. I mean, 1 game away from the Super Bowl.
No kidding. And the fact that they had to knock off Matty Stafford out of the playoffs to get there was a magical run for Detroit.
Oh, yeah.
But Detroit, one of the things that I've seen a lot of the media has been harping on, right? All this week, the media has been harping on the fact that they allowed so many, it was 349 pass yards to Baker Mayfield last week against Tampa Bay. Then the big question is whether or not they can hold up against a San Francisco offense that has been so dramatically good this year. However, they also discount the fact that Mike Evans was worth half of their yards and most of their offensive touchdowns scored through the air. So with Debo on the shelf, because he is still injured, he's the only player on the 49ers injury report that has yet to practice. He hurt his shoulder last game, and they've been real hush-hush about, kind of what his availability might even look like going into this game. Do you think that Detroit's defense can stand up, because they played well against Tampa Bay? Despite the fact that the score was as close as it was, the Detroit defense played incredibly well against Tampa Bay. And the way that their numbers have looked for most of the season, they allow a lot of yards to the number one wide receiver on the team and can kind of silence everybody else. So despite the fact that CMC is healthy, do you think that Detroit's defense can more or less hold out with San Francisco for a full 4 quarters, especially with their number one wide receiver not being 100%?
Well, I think Detroit needs to be very careful and not get caught up in the Debo Samuel situation, because whether he's on the field or not, you have to think that the 49ers are going to change their game plan. You're not going to see the same game plan they played against Green Bay. Green Bay sort of probably caught them off guard because they didn't know how Debo Samuel was going to be impacted in that game, and they found out that they wouldn't have much use for him. But you can also use Christian McCaffrey and Juwan Jennings. You're going to have other people. Christian McCaffrey can be used in several ways also, So you have to see how Shanahan is going to use McCaffrey. Are you going to run this guy? Are you going to use him as a receiver? Use him like a Wes Welker type guy, which could kill Detroit's defense. So you got to just see what they're going to do. You still got Kittle, and you got Juwan Jennings that can come out there. And don't forget about Brandon
Ayuk. Yes, sir.
Purdy's number one guy.
Very true. Very true. And the one thing with Christian McCaffrey, the one thing that I can say is that Detroit's defense over the course of the year has only allowed 88 yards on average to opposing running backs. So assuming that they could maybe not stop the run, but slow it to the point of it not deciding kind of how the game is going to roll out, we could definitely see CMC take on that switchblade role where he ends up playing slot receiver, or he gets wheeled out wide and he has to beat the defense in other ways, because it's very likely that Detroit's run defense will be able to hold up in the trenches.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's what I think, because we used to see, if they got everything running the way it normally runs, then you'll see CMC doing what he does and Samuel doing what he does. But that's not going to be the case, man. You're not probably going to have Debo, and they're going to improvise. Christian McCaffrey is still going to burn you, whether he's running the ball from the backfield or catching it. And that's just the 49ers got other ways that they can burn the almost said Pistons, Jacob, the Lions.
Oh man! So with this was one of the. Are you excited to see Jahmyr Gibbs in the playoffs against the 49ers? Like, is between him and Sam Laporta, talk about two of the best offensive draft picks Detroit has made simultaneously in generations, decades. Are you excited to see what Jahmyr Gibbs and Sam Laporta are going to be able to do, especially if, Sam Laporta got hurt already and he made this miraculous comeback somehow and he played really well last week? Do you think that they could be, impactful to the game in more ways than one? And do you think that they will be deciding factors in who ultimately ends up taking it?
Well, look at this, man. This is the reason why the Detroit Lions are there. Imagine teams that have been in position to draft well and have stunk it up. The Detroit Lions is not one of those teams. Over the last few years, man, they have built their way through success through the draft, whether it's Aiden Hutchinson, Laporta, and Jahmyr Gibbs. Man, look at this situation here. Rookies making an impact in the playoffs here, not just, with the Lions. I mean, all of these teams got, some either first or second year players that are impactful. So the draft is just really working, especially when you do well with this. But no, I think these guys are going to be, and look, they have made a difference. There's no way the Lions get to the NFC Championship game without Sam Laporta and Jahmyr Gibbs. Okay, and I know David Montgomery has done a whole lot to help them, but man, you can ask any of those guys, man. Laporta and Gibbs have really carried a lot of the load, and yeah, they will be needed in this game, and they could make a difference and win. And I think the Lions have an advantage in how they use Montgomery and Gibbs, because they got a 1-2 punch, something that the 49ers really don't have in the backfield. Man, you can put both of these guys in the backfield and just confuse the hell out of that defense, because you don't know who's going to get it, you don't know who's going to run it, and who's going to catch it. And so, I mean, this is going to be a hell of a game. I'm excited about it.
I absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. And then with the quarterback situation, Jared Goff's been to a Super Bowl before, albeit not with the Lions, but he's been to a Super Bowl before. You have Mr. Irrelevant, who was injured last playoffs, and with Brock Purdy and the San Francisco 49ers. What are you expecting out of the passing games for both of these? Because we have two very dynamic offenses, good at different things, but also some of the same things, right? They're both strong passing teams. San Francisco's a good running team. I would say Detroit's probably better at running as a team. San Francisco just has the best running back in football. But what are you expecting when you look at it in terms of how it gets hyped up on TV, right? The Brock Purdy versus the Jared Goff, even though they never see the field at the exact same time.
Yeah, I know. That's the marketing part of, football there. You got to throw those names out there like they're boxers or something, like they're going to meet in the middle of the ring.
Exactly.
But you know what? Jared Goff, look, man, this guy, it's good to see he's in a good place here. He led the Rams to a Super Bowl, didn't quite win, but man, no one's giving him credit for what he's done early on in his career. More people remember him for just being the guy that failed and got shipped out of L.A. And now look where he's at now. Failures don't do that, man. They did him a favor by getting him out of L.A., putting him in an environment, hooking him up with a Dan Campbell guy who gave him a chance. Because remember, a lot of people thought that he was just going to be there for a short period of time, and they was going to trade him for a better quarterback. And here we are. Jared Goff is still the man, and has thrown for what? Good Lord, almost 5,000 passing yards this year.
Just
4,500 yards.
Yeah.
So, who would have thunk that, right? So, man, give this guy high praises here. But as far as this game here, I think Jared Goff, the pressure is not on him to have to pass this ball, because you got two good running backs there. Man, they could really – I hope they come with a good game plan for him that doesn't call for him to have to throw the ball unnecessarily. He can dump it off to Gibbs. You got Montgomery. Man, you got running backs that can just run that ball up and down that field. But Montgomery over 1,000 yards, and Gibbs over 1,000 yards. He can't go wrong with these guys. That would make his job easier. And then, of course, you got Amon-Ra St. Brown, and you got Sam Laporta. So this guy, you got Reynolds, who came over from the Rams also. So I think Jared Goff can just sit back and chill, whereas Brock Purdy, he might have to pass the ball, because you just can't CMC as your only running back there. So you really can't, Brock Purdy does have to throw the ball. And I think this is where Detroit might be, licking their lips. They're waiting for him to do that so they can pick him off.
That's very true. And I agree. I do know, the Lions have Jonah Jackson and Frank Ragnow, both interior offensive linemen that haven't practiced yet this week and have suffered from injuries here lately. So I'm hoping you're right. I'm hoping that Jared Goff doesn't have to throw the ball a lot. I am leaning towards Detroit for the upset for this game, but
yeah, me too. This one is a little easier than the Kansas City Baltimore one, because Jacob, look, man, since the NFL playoffs started, the number one seeds have only met up 13 times. Last year they met up. Kansas City, Philadelphia were both number one seeds. I don't think we're going to see two number one seeds. So, both number one seeds could lose or one. And the one I think that's probably likely to lose would be the 49ers.
Agreed, especially since they've dropped more games that they probably shouldn't have. I mean, I know neither them nor Baltimore have a lot of losses this season, but most of Baltimore's losses were either close or made sense, and San Francisco's fallen off for tidbits of time here this season. So, of both of the teams, San Francisco has lost more games that it didn't make sense for them to lose. The Ravens win every game that they're supposed to win. So,
and the Ravens lost twice to the Pittsburgh Steelers. So you got to be thinking, if you can't see, there's probably not enough film there to see how the Steelers were able to accomplish that. But still, those were just, one-offs, I guess. But still, they lost to, the same. Two of those losses, two of the four losses that the Ravens have came to one team. I don't know if that's enough information to run with.
Very true. It's also a divisional game, which is hard to put a metric to, because divisional games are different no matter how bad teams are. I mean, look at what the Patriots beat the Bills this year. That game didn't make any sense, right? Like, divisional games just shake up a little different than regular games do.
Yeah, that is true. That is really true. But man, so many players out this week, and we don't have the injury reports. But I got to think that, look, these guys are going to play unless someone is just really doubtful. I think you're going to see more guys out there. I think they're all going to be questionable, but I think you're going to see these guys play in limited practice. But tomorrow you're going to see some people practice that probably didn't get out there. But I think everybody's going to be a go, because you saw Christian McCaffrey getting worked on. It looked like he may have had some hamstring type things going on there. So, but I think everybody's going to be a go come Sunday.
That's very true. You're probably right. That would make the most sense with it being championship weekend. But outside of championship weekend, right? Have you seen some of this new head coaching news going around? How the Buccaneers offensive coordinator got hired as the Panthers head coach, and Bill Belichick did not get taken as Atlanta's head coach, and how Mike Vrabel's still available. Are you keeping up with this coaching rush any at all?
Absolutely. And we sort of talked this morning, because look, the Panthers hiring shocked me a little bit. I don't know. The way you fire Frank Reich and you bring in these guys. This guy seems to be a one and done guy to me. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the Panthers are looking for, and I don't think this is the guy. Just like the guy that's coaching Alabama. I don't think he's the guy. I don't think that's the replacement to Nick Saban, and I think they'll find that out in the next couple of years. I mean, you just can't. I think they jumped on that guy to save those recruitments, that were bailing out.
Very true.
So I get that, but this Panthers hire, I don't get now. And then this latest one with the Falcons. Look, I talked this morning on the MeanGene show. There was something going on with the Belichick thing there. And Arthur Blank and some of his own front office people were not in agreement on Bill Belichick. Now, I don't know if who didn't want who, but I'm thinking if Arthur Blank, being the owner, if he didn't sign off on it, then it wasn't going to happen any damn way. And then the same day we talk about this, 10 hours later, they hire Raheem Morris. So this is quite interesting. But now Atlanta is in a better situation there, because that team is, they got better players, if you ask me, than the Panthers. Okay, so you're getting the Desmond Ridder and now here you got Robinson. You got some pretty good players, Drake London and Kyle Pitts. So that's a pretty good situation and this is Raheem Morris' second time around as a head coach. So we'll see how that goes. But Belichick out, I just think Belichick wants too much power, and I think that might have been some of the things that maybe management, some of the people in the organization just wasn't comfortable with Belichick coming in and maybe some of the demands that he wanted.
You're probably right. What a year for football this is going to end up being. No Nick Saban at Alabama, no Bill Belichick for any team in the league, at least so far. But there's only
no
so
Pete
many
Carroll.
teams available. Yeah, no Pete Carroll. Like, we lost a lot of big names in the coaching carousel this year for football.
Yeah, and look, I mean, these guys are older. You start getting into the 70 club. All good things got to come to an end. Although those guys look like they could probably coach for another 10 years. Saban walked those sidelines, Belichick, with the hoodies, and Pete Carroll chewing the bubble gum, walking 100 miles an hour. They didn't look their age.
You're very
they
right.
Looked like they could go. They looked like they could go a little bit longer.
Bill Belichick's looked the same since I was a little kid. I can't even remember a time he didn't look like he does right now, which is wild.
Exactly. Just the hair a little bit, grayer, but yeah, he's still the same guy.
Well, let me ask you, since we're talking about coaches, how do you feel about Jim Harbaugh to LA? How do you like the Jim Harbaugh hire for the Chargers coming in to take over Justin Herbert and that prolific offense with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, and Austin Eckler might be on the way out, but they've got a stable of running backs behind him. How do you like the Jim Harbaugh fit in LA?
Well, that's the best job that was there. I mean, good Lord. Yeah, the Harbaugh brothers are not stupid. They're smart guys. And that team right there is the closest damn thing to autopilot, if you ask me, because you got a situation there where the defense, you got Bosa, you got Khalil Mack, you got maybe he can convince Eckler to stay, maybe, and then you got Allen, you got even Williams, the other wide receiver who had got hurt, and then Palmer, who stepped in when Williams got hurt. So, and then you got the quarterback in Justin Herbert. Man, this is a good situation for Jim Harbaugh. This was a good situation for anybody.
True.
But Harbaugh, this is great. And then so you put him in that division now. So you got Jim Harbaugh, you got Sean Payton, you got Andy Reid, and now you got Antonio Pierce. So the AFC West is going to be exciting next year.
Agreed. And that I'm glad you said Antonio Pierce, because that was my wrap up with the coaches. I've been excited for Antonio Pierce since he took over for the Raiders. I thought he was through and through the embodiment of what a coach for the Raiders should be, especially after all of his pressers and whatnot. How do you like Antonio Pierce finally getting the interim label peeled off? How do you like Patrick Graham as defensive coordinator potentially sticking around for a run it back season when, honestly, Patrick Graham should have been getting head coaching offers from teams for putting together such a great Raiders defense with no money spent. So how do you feel about the Raiders moving into next season? Do you think that they are on the right path and that this is finally, maybe Mark Davis is getting something right? We might see some sort of continuity and some growth with the Raiders after so many down years?
You're going to need that, because if anyone could learn from the Cleveland Browns of yesteryears, all of those draft picks, all of those quarterbacks, all of those coaching changes, man, dysfunction, just imagine. They went through, 10, 11 quarterbacks?
Give or take.
9, 10 coaches, all of those coordinators that comes with that. I mean, just see what that does to an organization. It sets you back. And there's a reason why the Patriots and some of these other teams are successful, because of the turnovers. And coaching. You can't have that. And the Raiders should learn just from the previous year when they had Bisaccia who filled in, and when they had Gruden left. So look, they get it right. They owe it to their fans. They owe it to the players, and they have a young team there, a young quarterback. You have to have some consistency. And it looks like, they dodged a bullet by not losing the defensive coordinator, because he could have been, there's a lot of openings out there.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can keep the consistency there, that's what you want to do. Like, I hate seeing that the Texans are going to lose the offensive coordinator who had worked with C.J. Stroud. Man, that, you could have a little minor setback there, because those things matter so much when you come in and work with these rookies early in their career, and then you go changing the guard on these guys. I think the Raiders are going to be good. You're going to have to be, because Harbaugh's coming in with a ready-made team. Peyton's coming back. The Broncos, you saw that they were surging in the second half of the year.
They were good, yeah.
And then the Chiefs are the Chiefs.
Very true, yeah.
So, yeah.
Mark Davis. Go ahead.
No. You have to stay on top of stuff. You can't afford the turnover.
Agree. Yeah. And Mark Davis had one of my favorite quotes of the season after he named Antonio Pierce the head coach, where he came out and, because they had Max Crosby and Devontae Adams both came out and they're like, if AP isn't retained, right, we're going to request a trade. And Mark Davis came out and he was like, it makes it really easy to make a decision when half your team is threatening to mutiny. And that was like my favorite quote all season because they really did. And I am more excited for Raiders football than I have been since the black hole because people just seem to be buying into what Antonio Pierce is selling.
Well, it's a good situation there, and you're gonna need that. And I hated to see Versace didn't get that job because they probably would have been, 1 year ahead of this year. But it worked out in their favor, and you got to just take the bull by the horn and run with it. And you bring those guys back, whatever good. I think they're gonna get a good draft pick this year, and just keep building and if you beat the Chargers and beat the Broncos, you're competing for a wild card maybe.
It's very true. Yeah, there's a clear path to the playoffs for them starting right now.
Absolutely.
So, well, that's all I've got for you, Gene. Thank you so much for joining the show, everybody. Once again, this is MeanGene, the Sports King. And we absolutely look forward to having you back on the show, maybe this off season, maybe a little bit next season, just to kind of talk up some sports. How does that sound?
Jacob, anytime you need me, brother, I'm here for you, man.
I appreciate it, my man. And thank you so much for taking time out of your night. Thank you for being on the show. Have a great night, MeanGene.
All right, you too, Jacob. Thanks a lot, man.
All right, guys, and with all of that said, we are going to bring this episode to a wrap. I am leaning towards a Baltimore victory, and I also think that I am leaning towards a Detroit Lion victory over the 49ers. I will have a gambling show this week for the first time in a couple of weeks. Look out for that to be dropped this Saturday. It will not have music or anything behind it. There is no editing on the gambling takes. I'm just going to go over the over and under and a couple of the small bets for the both championship games. So with that being said, thank you all for tuning in. I love all of my listeners. I hope you have enjoyed both of my shows this week. That will bring us to a close, and I look forward to seeing y'all again next week as we start preparing to do Super Bowl updates and potentially Pro Bowl coverage, depending on what ends up shaking out there. So once more, thank you all again for tuning in, and I will see you soon. Later.